The meeting ended without agreement. As Eris was preparing to descend, Jay's aide delivered a sealed note, a personal invitation. Eris, you are a cartographer. You trust the truth of the ground. The current border is based on maps drawn in Calcutta under a roof, never on the ground itself. Meet me at the Sutlej Gorge, 50 kilometers west of the command post. It is the most remote, volatile point on the border, a genuine no man's land. We will go together, alone, and trace the line with our own hands. We will let the river and the stone tell us the truth. If you believe in the truth you claim to serve, you will come. Bring only your compass and your boots. Leave your treaties behind. Jayan. This was the dramatic pivot. A political negotiation dissolved into a dangerous, unsanctioned expedition, a private test of two men, two ideals, and two conflicting loyalties at the most dangerous point on the dividing line. The test. Journey into the zero-sum game. The descent into the gorge. The journey to the Sutlej Gorge was a brutal 3-day trek. Eris accepted the invitation, driven by a perverse need to confront the man Jay had become. The gorge was a catastrophic slit in the earth, a place where the wind sounded like a sustained scream. The Sutlej River, snow-fed and furious, ripped through the granite bottom, forming the physical dividing line. They were watched by distant, unseen patrols from both sides. Jay arrived with only a single, silent guide, a grizzled, mountain-born soldier. Their first day was spent trying to establish a baseline. Eris, the cartographer, used his theodolite and compass, searching for the hydrographic divide, the scientifically neutral crest where water flow naturally splits. This, in his mind, was the pure truth. Jay watched him. That evening, huddled around a meager fire, Jay offered his counter-argument. You measured the split of the water flow, Eris, but what of the human flow? That structure across the gorge is the ancient winter grazing ground of the shepherd tribes, our people, for 200 years. Your immutable line cuts them off from their ancestral pasture. The geological truth contradicts the cultural truth, Eris. Which one should a nation honor? The cultural truth is mutable, Jay, Eris insisted. Culture shift, people move. The law is meant to be a constant. If we redraw the map every time a cultural practice is inconvenienced, we invite endless violent chaos. We must accept the minor inconvenience for the sake of the major stability. Minor convenience? Jay laughed, harsh and cold. There is no stability built on injustice. Your law protects the comfort of those who made it. My purpose is to protect the dignity of those who were ignored by it. The cold, high-altitude night had turned their discussion into a dangerous confession. The prioritization of law versus the prioritization of life. The bridge and the climax. On the third day, the crisis arrived. They discovered an old, rickety rope bridge spanning the gorge, a forgotten, unofficial crossing. As they approached, they saw movement on the far bank. A small group of civilians, an old woman, 2 younger adults, and a child were attempting to cross from Jay's side into Eris's claimed territory, dragging small bundles. They looked starved and desperate. "They're trying to cross the line," Jay's accompanying soldier hissed, raising his rifle. "They are violating the sovereign territory." Jay put a hand on his soldier's shoulder. "Hold your fire, Captain. Let them cross." Eris watched, paralyzed. His rational mind screamed, "This is an international incident." As the old woman stepped on the swaying bridge, the air filled with the sharp, cracking sound of automatic rifle fire, not from Jay's soldier, but from the far ridge, from the opposing patrol. The firing was aimed to deter, a burst into the water, but the shock was enough. The old woman stumbled, losing her footing, clutching desperately at the guide rope. In that agonizing, suspended moment, Eris saw Jay's political facade shatter. "They are firing on civilians!" Jay roared. Jay sprinted to the bridge, not hesitating, and began running across the impossibly unstable structure. He was risking his life, crossing into enemy territory, all for an ethical imperative. He was enacting the pragmatic morality he had preached. The value of a single human life transcends all law, all borders. Then I heard the sound of the enemy's weapons being racked again. The next burst would not be a warning shot. They would assume Jay, a uniformed officer, was leading a hostile infiltration. In that instant, Eris's own rigid ideological certainty fractured. His logic demanded he report the breach, but the sight of his friend, his brother, charging into a death trap for the sake of a stranger overwhelmed his doctrine of stability. The blood was thicker than the treaty. Eris acted. He grabbed his heavy, steel-cased theodolite, his most prized professional possession, the physical embodiment of his belief in objective, geometric truth, and with a shout, hurled it with all his strength against the rock face directly opposite Jay, near the enemy's patrol position. The crash was deafening, a sharp, metallic ring that echoed unnaturally. The hostile patrol, momentarily confused by the sudden, loud noise, paused their firing for a crucial second, their attention diverted to the source of the shockwave. That second was all Jay needed. He reached the old woman, grabbed her arm, and shoved the entire group forward onto safer ground on the far bank. Then he turned and sprinted back across the bridge, the enemy fire now screaming past him. Jay made it back across, landing hard. The reckoning. Jay was breathing heavily, his face white, but his eyes blazing. He looked at Eris, who stood motionless, his hands shaking, stripped of his cartographical tool and his professional neutrality. "Why?" Jay gasped, still trying to catch his breath. "You were going to be shot, you bloody fool. I had to distract them. You broke the rule, Jay, and I helped you." Eris had just destroyed his primary tool to save the life of the man who championed subjective, human truth. He chose Jay's life over his own law.
Jay did not smile in gratitude. His expression was one of profound, terrible pity. "You risked your life for me, Eris. I am grateful," Jay said, his voice flat. "But look where we stand. I saved 4 people, I broke your treaty. You saved 1 officer, you broke your code. The cost of your stability, Eris, is measured in the lives of the people you consider inconvenient, and today you realized you cannot pay it." He pointed to the far bank, where the civilians were scrambling away. "They are free, Eris. They followed necessity, and they are alive. That is the victory. And your beautiful law," he gestured to the shattered theodolite, "is in pieces on the rock. It taught you nothing. The gorge taught you everything." He turned to his guide. "We leave. Now." Jay did not look back. He had won the argument, not with words, but with an act of moral commitment that Eris, the man of maps, could not match and ultimately could not stand in the way of. The ideological division had crystallized into a fundamental, irreconcilable difference in action. IV. Resolution. The echoes of the storm. The legacy of the gorge. Eris descended the mountain alone, carrying only the weight of his shattered beliefs and the remains of his theodolite, a twisted metallic relic. The experience in the gorge had done what years of academic debate could not. It had proven his philosophy of rigid, institutional stability to be insufficient, perhaps even callous, in the face of raw, desperate human need. Jay's nation did not claim the territory crossed by the civilians, but the story of the bridge, filtered through the mountain passes, became a potent symbol. The nation that chooses people over paper. Jay's political career surged, validated by a heroism that transcended mere policy. Eris wrote his final report. It was not a cartographer's report. It was an essay on the limits of legal truth. He concluded that any border, any line drawn by man that failed to account for the migratory rhythm and existential need of the people it divided was not a solution, but a dormant conflict. His recommendations were quietly ignored by the policymakers who still operated in the realm of legal documents, but his essay became influential in humanist circles and academic dissent. 5 years later, the two men would briefly cross paths at a high-level summit in Geneva, a sterile environment far removed from the cold reality of the Karakoram. Jay was a rising cabinet minister, Aris a revered, if controversial, policy consultant. They met in a quiet, glass-walled corridor overlooking a manicured lawn. "Professor Thorne," Jay said, offering a professional, brief handshake. "Minister Mitra," Aris returned. The old camaraderie was dead, replaced by a deep, shared respect for the trauma they had survived. "The line still holds," Jay remarked. "Yes," Aris conceded, "but you taught me that the line on the map is merely the surface tension. The real dividing line runs not between nations, but between the man's head and his heart." "And what did your heart tell you, Aris? Finally?" Aris looked away, toward the distant mountains visible on the horizon, an echo of the gorge. "It told me that the law must serve the human being, Jay, not the other way around. My fault was not in believing in law, but in forgetting that a law that cannot bend to save a life is no longer just. You forced me to choose life, and for that I am eternally indebted." Jay nodded. A flicker of their old friendship warmed his eyes. "We both learned the same lesson, Aris, the one that requires a storm in the blood to truly understand. The greatest wisdom is not found in drawing the perfect line, but in knowing when to step across the one that binds you." The valuable lesson. The story of Aris Thorne and Jayan Mitra is a lesson that echoes across history. The tension between the ideal and the necessary. It teaches us that political and philosophical arguments, when tested by the crucible of war or crisis, cease to be intellectual exercises. They become visceral choices. Aris, the man of the map and the law, learned that stability without humanity is tyranny. Jay, the man of the people and the revolution, learned that humanity without structure is chaos. Their ultimate tragic truth was that the ideal solution, a system that is both perfectly ordered and perfectly compassionate, was perhaps unreachable. But their personal reckoning in the gorge proved that when forced to choose, the line must be broken for the sake of life. The dividing line was less a physical border and more the permanent, painful rift between what we know is right and what we must do to survive.